Before I start this video, I'd like to say that I have sat and observed for the last few years without taking a side, until I was absolutely sure of where I stood, and now I am sure that the truth is finally being uncovered after listening to nothing but lies for almost 4 damn years. None of us are angels, nor should anyone believe we are, but that doesn't give anyone the right to slander us for crimes of which we're innocent. And all too often, it's those who present themselves as angels who are in fact guilty of fabricating stories, preying on the weak-minded, and exploiting the trauma of the very real victims of abuse. The very survivors who they themselves also claim to be. And all in a concerted effort to destroy the lives of those who were smart enough to get the fuck away from them years ago. Unlike certain parties, I'm going to be upfront and honest from the very outset. I've been a fan of Marilyn Manson, the band and the artist, since the age of 12, and that was all the way back in 1996. But 28 years of fandom are not going to influence where I stand when it comes to the kind of crimes the man behind the moniker, Brian Hugh Warner, is alleged to have committed. When said allegations began, I was, like a lot of people, taken aback. Because it wasn't simply just one person making such allegations against him. It actually started to resemble the case of the notorious Hollywood producer, Harvey Weinstein. And I call him that because I think it's crystal clear to anyone with a working brain that Harvey was 100% guilty of the many offenses he was accused of. So whatever you may think of me or my opinion at the conclusion of this video, I want you to at least acknowledge that I take this case and all cases like it very seriously, and the fact that it's taken me a few years to reach my verdict or to confirm that I never reached it blinded by my own fandom in any way. Narcissism is a mental issue. It is not a choice a person can make. There are those who are self-aware, however, and it really depends on how kind-natured they are as to whether their narcissism manifests in malicious behavior or simply focuses on drawing attention to oneself. As I said at the outset, none of us are angels, and no one should pretend they are. Manson has never done that, and indeed, he has been widely documented as mistreating former colleagues. His ex-girlfriend, however, is trying to paint herself in such a positive light that her own narcissism is blinding for all the world to see. Her attacks against Manson reveal a malicious side to her nature, which has seen her own child get taken off her. Just like in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, it's clear neither of the two parties involved are angels, but only one of them is fabricating their story in order to make themselves appear like a victim. And it says more about a person who lies to make someone else look bad. If a person really were guilty, then liars wouldn't need to lie. The evidence would be all there for the world to see, but in this case, there has been zero evidence presented. And after 4 years, there comes a point where you just have to accept that the evidence is non-existent. So before I begin my track-by-track analysis of this album, I'll say that I shall not be referring to the accusers by name. If you've paid attention to this case, it'd be fairly obvious which of the accusers I'm referring to in the song lyrics as I analyze them. Track 1 is One Assassination Under God. Opening with an eerie synth, not unlike those of vintage Depeche Mode, the title track soon begins to unfold in typically ominous Manson fashion. Feeling more than a little familiar to those who listened to Hollywood for the first time and were greeted with the chilling God Eat God. The title track sounds similar in delivery but far more combustible musically. And when it catches fire, it truly does take the form of a towering inferno. The scintillating guitars will stick with you as much as the lyrics themselves. Manson's voice soars on the chorus, which explains, everybody showed up for the execution, but nobody would show their face. To shoot you in the back of the head and call it a sacrifice, they don't even deserve to say your name. This isn't Manson directing an attack at anyone in particular, it's more him speaking out to the listener, telling them exactly how he feels and not judging them in the way he himself is being judged. And upon his fourth and most furious chant of Assassination, he well and truly swallows the listener, trapping them inside for the remainder of what promises to be a relentless ride of pent-up rage and personal retribution. Manson could not have picked a better song with which to kick off his first album in the 4 years since he was the subject of a hoax perpetrated by those who have exploited and weaponized the Me Too movement for their own sick, twisted, and selfish ends. Manson closes the song with a defiant declaration that he is not a sacrifice. From this point on, the listener is audience to Manson's innermost thoughts rather than simply a bench-sitting juror in the trial of his life. Manson understands that while he still commands a huge fan base, not everyone will so easily dismiss the accusations against him, and he respects that more than the media would like them to believe. So instead of making the album of relentless anger many expected, he's inviting each listener inside as an individual. He doesn't need to prove his innocence, and he's damn sure not going to plead it. Instead, he's going to present you with a lesson in basic human psychology. And he's using both himself and his accusers as subjects throughout his lyrics. Track 2 is No Funeral Without Applause. Beginning with an instantly memorable guitar melody, the song is disarming in its delectability, especially after the intense declaration of the title track. The lyrics are just as lacerating, but the music, which blends bewitching synth keys with those aforementioned guitars, is for the most part rather relaxing. The music does become more bruising on the chorus, however, with Manson spitting out the kind of venom he used to decades earlier. And this is something he continues to do on the next track. Track 3 is Nod If You Understand. If the previous track reminded listeners of the Manson they'd known for decades earlier, then this one well and truly resurrects the one true god of fuck, 30 years after he first proclaimed himself exactly that. If you grew up listening to Manson in the 90s, then you'll feel like you've been gifted with an unreleased song from the decade from which you discovered him. Nod If You Understand is a song very much in the same vein as the recent B-side, Front Toward Enemy, and perhaps the song which was the reason that Front Toward Enemy does not make this track list. It's possible that Manson felt that they were too similar to sit alongside one another, and I can respect that. Basically, if you liked Front Toward Enemy, then you'll love Nod If You Understand, and if you loved Front Toward Enemy, you'll really fucking love this similar, and in my opinion, superior piece of work. And it's on this track that Manson fulfills what many of us fans prophesized, the resurrection of the Antichrist superstar. And what better way to follow up the resurrection than with the song which began the prophecy just a few months ago. Track 4 is As Sick as the Secrets Within. This was the first taste of new music by Manson after 4 troubled years. To say that his fanbase was blown away would be an understatement. Not only is he back making music, but he's also looking and sounding a good 25 years younger. This was the Manson from the Hollywood era we were seeing and hearing. And anyone who follows Manson knows that Hollywood leads right back to Antichrist Superstar, the 2 albums which by design are considered both the first and final installments of the triptych, a trilogy of albums whose middle piece, Mechanical Animals, was for many the peak of Manson's popularity in the 20th century, an album somewhat comparable to his 2020 release, We Are Chaos, in that both were met with enormous critical and commercial acclaim, but both were also swiftly followed by media-fueled campaigns to cancel Manson once and for all. Back in 1999, it was the Columbine High School massacre that the media weaponized to get at Manson. And in 2020, it was the Me Too hoax orchestrated by his ex-girlfriend and her co-conspirators. Is it any wonder that when Manson returned to the stage in 2024, he declared, "The last time they tried to kill me, I made Hollywood." There isn't much I can say about As Sick as the Secrets Within, which hasn't already been said, other than it's one of his finest songs of any era. Track 5 is Sacrilegious, and if the 2 previous songs were straight out of Antichrist Superstar and Hollywood respectively, then it's only fitting that this one, the centerpiece of the album, sounds like it could have fit on the centerpiece of the triptych itself, Mechanical Animals. Here we have Manson at his most playful in a very long time. Sacrilegious is practically a disco song, or rather a death disco song. It's not particularly creative on a musical level, but it doesn't need to be. It's all about moving and grooving, though you shouldn't dismiss the lyrics at all. They are full of trademark Manson mockery and more than a little satirical. If Manson is being political, then he's taking neither side. He's reminding both that they'll never be on his level, and it's actually fucking refreshing to hear an artist speaking for himself and not for one side of his nation. Manson does not want to be Mr. President, he's already happy being Mr. Superstar, and he's coming back, baby. Track 6 is Death Is Not a Costume, and I can see this song being considered something of a hidden gem. It begins the second half of the album in atmospheric fashion and makes heavier use of electronics than anything else on the track list. It's not as catchy as the previous songs, but in my opinion, it's absolutely deserving of anyone's top 5. Death Is Not a Costume rides the same 80s flavored dark wave that Don't Chase the Dead did on the We Are Chaos album. For me, it's also a little reminiscent of Disassociative from the aforementioned Mechanical Animals album. You could file this one next to not only that, but also Minute of Decay from the Antichrist Superstar album and Lamb of God from the Hollywood album. 3 songs which have never been given their due, it seems, neither on the live stage nor by the majority of the fanbase. I can see Death Is Not a Costume going the same way, but like those other songs, those of us who love it will never stop talking about it. Track 7 is Meet Me in Purgatory, and if there was one song on the album that I wouldn't have minded leaving off, it would be this up-tempo and rather unremarkable number. It just feels a little like New Model 15 from Mechanical Animals to me. Dare I say, a bit filler on an album of otherwise killer songs. It says a lot about how strong the album is when one song sticks out so much. I would have gladly traded it for the B-side, Front Toward Enemy, but like I said earlier, I can see why Manson chose not to include that on this album. So instead we have Meet Me in Purgatory, and it's a decent little ditty with a strong bass line, but just don't expect it to be ranking high among fans. Track 8 is Raise the Red Flag. This was another single which previewed the album, and it became an even bigger hit than As Sick as the Secrets Within, though many, myself included, feel that the earlier song was and still is much better. But I still really like Raise the Red Flag a lot, though I do have to question its placement as the penultimate song on this track list. It actually feels like the kind of song which should have been earlier on the album. If Manson didn't want it for track 2, then why not track 7? Swapping its placement around with Meet Me in Purgatory could have worked out alright. Even better would have been to put Front Toward Enemy in between the two, or like I said earlier, in the place of Meet Me in Purgatory. But enough of what I would have done, and back to the album that we have. Raise the Red Flag has a lot of bite, both in its sound and its lyrical content. It's probably going to be the most quoted song on the album, with such gems as Why Pretend in a Room Full of Fakes, Something Made Up for Idiots to Praise, Your Loyalty Lies on the Wrong Side of the Future, and Losers Love Liars Till Their Dying Day. Musically, it's definitely another slice of Mechanical Animals style synth rock, with a thicker industrial flavoring than anything else on the album. But it's the brief outro which for me tells the story of the album. Just as the opening title track felt like Manson had swallowed the listener whole, the final moments of Raise the Red Flag sounds like he's releasing them back out into the world. And from this point on the album, the listener finds themselves free from the cell that is Manson's psyche. They are back to where they were at the start of the album, only now they've been given enough of an insight to hopefully understand the man the media is asking them to judge. Manson's final words are a far cry from the declaration he made on the opening title track. In fact, they almost feel like an act of submission to whomever is listening. The only ones he trusts will judge him fairly. And that brings us to the 9th and final track, Sacrifice of the Mass. And the album reaches its conclusion on what is for me a contender for Manson's greatest ballad to date. It's definitely among the best songs he's ever recorded this century, and I remember having a gut feeling as soon as the tracklist was revealed. Sacrifice of the Mass was potentially a successor to the supreme Man That You Fear, and I was right. The song sounds very much like that fan favorite from almost 30 years ago, but at the same time it has its own unique sound. The Spanish flavored guitar which opens the song sets the scene, not unlike that scene in the Man That You Fear music video. Only this time, Manson is singing about his reality rather than the fantasy which gave birth to Man That You Fear. A song he wrote about coming to terms with his discomfort around Christians and his disdain for their hypocrisy. He imagined himself growing up to be the person that they feared and thus hated in the way only loving Christians can. The music video depicted him on the verge of being stoned to death. The first assassination of his career, but still only one he fantasized about. Now he finds himself being assassinated again, only this time it's in the real world, and he has no control over it like he would in a music video. All he has is his music with which to speak out, and that's exactly what he's done on this album. But on this final track, he ponders his future, a future he must face without a father who would have definitely fought in his corner. A future where his deceased mother's voice calls louder to him the closer he himself moves towards her final age. A future he's determined to face sober, unlike his past. And he's seizing the present moment while he can, because he knows there are no guarantees in his predicament. Sacrifice of the Mass is a heartfelt ballad that will hit you harder than just about anything Manson has ever written. It's also the most musically interesting song on the album. The acoustic guitar is merely the beginning of a tune which incorporates everything from synthesizers to organs to piano keys and finally a fantastic guitar solo. But the true star of the song, and indeed the album, is Manson himself. He's not sounded this healthy and motivated in almost 25 years. He is well and truly back to his best, and I look forward to hearing whatever he has in store on the next chapter of this already classic album. November of 2024 has been quite a month for music fans of both generations X and Y. I myself am the latter, and I've seen at least 3 important chart releases that many doubted would ever see the light of day. The first was The Cure, with their long-awaited new album, Songs of a Lost World. The second would be the rebirth of Linkin Park, with their new comeback album, From Zero. The third of these is now upon us, and it is of course Marilyn Manson, and what is going to be for many, his most satisfying album in decades. As much as I loved We Are Chaos, I know that not everybody did. For some it was a step too far away from what Manson had been. One Assassination Under God, on the other hand, is as old school as Manson can possibly get. It's almost like the characters from Antichrist Superstar, Mechanical Animals, and Hollywood got together to dig him out of that place in the dirt where many of his so-called friends had left him. And thus he paid them back by giving them one last ride on record. Whether Chapter 2 of this incomplete album continues to utilize Manson's past personas remains to be seen, but even if it doesn't, we can at least thank him for making all of us people who were there from the beginning feel beautiful again. And as we continue to sing the praises of this truly remarkable artist, we know that it comes at the price of being branded hateful. Especially as we stand behind him in calling out the real criminals in this ongoing legal saga. But while some folks truly deserve to be hated, we are all here united by our mutual love of the man that many tried to ban countless times before and failed every single fucking time. It's true that we live in a different climate today than we did 25 years ago, But we haven't made it to this point for nothing, so as he would say to us, get up and fight.
Assassination, assassination.